Before we dive into this riveting tale of justice and retribution, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to this channel. Each week, we bring you compelling stories like the one you're about to hear. Stories of triumph over adversity that will leave you thinking long after they end. Now, let's begin our journey with Judith Crawford. The polished marble floors of the Davidson County Courthouse echoed with each deliberate step of Judith Crawford's Italian leather pumps. At 45, she carried herself with the poised confidence of a woman who had built her life through calculation and foresight. Her charcoal gray suit was impeccably tailored, her auburn hair styled in a sleek bob that framed a face bearing the subtle lines of experience rather than age. 20 feet away, Bradley Crawford lounged against the wall, his designer shirt untucked, a smirk playing across his once handsome features. His attorney, a slick young man with an expensive watch and hungry eyes, leaned in to whisper something that made Bradley chuckle. When he caught Judith's gaze, he raised his eyebrows in mock greeting. "You're looking well, Jude," he called across the hallway, using the nickname she had always despised. "Enjoying what's left of our money?" Judith felt her heart rate quicken, but her expression remained impassive. 5 years of marriage to Bradley had taught her to conceal her emotions with masterful precision. She simply nodded to her attorney, a stern woman in her 60s named Eleanor Winters, who placed a reassuring hand on her client's shoulder. "Don't engage," Eleanor whispered. "He wants a reaction. Remember what we discussed." The courtroom doors opened, and a bailiff emerged to usher them inside. Bradley strode forward with the confidence of a man who believed the world owed him everything. As Judith passed through the heavy wooden doors, she caught a glimpse of the nameplate on the bench: Judge Thomas Richardson, the man who would decide her fate, and Bradley's. A cold knot formed in the pit of her stomach as memories of the past 5 years flashed through her mind. The lavish parties Bradley had insisted on throwing with her money, the brand new sports cars he purchased without consultation, the investments in his friend's doomed restaurant venture. And now, his attempt to claim half of everything she owned, including the $2,800,000 her beloved grandmother had left her. As she settled into her seat, Judith reached into her briefcase and touched the edge of a document folder, containing the single piece of paper that Bradley never expected her to produce. 5.5 years earlier, Nashville's Belmead district had been abuzz with preparations for what society columns were calling the autumn wedding of the year. Judith Adams, a successful business consultant with a growing roster of Fortune 500 clients, was marrying Bradley Crawford, a charming pharmaceutical sales representative with movie star good looks and an infectious laugh. "Are you absolutely certain about this?" Eleanor had asked during a private meeting in her office just 3 weeks before the wedding. Eleanor had been more than Judith's attorney. She had been a close friend of Judith's grandmother, Margaret, and had promised to look after her granddaughter. "Eleanor, I love him," Judith had replied, her eyes bright with the kind of certainty that comes before experience tempers idealism. "But I'm not naive. That's why I asked you to draw up the prenuptial agreement." Eleanor had nodded approvingly, sliding the document across her mahogany desk. "This protects everything you brought into the marriage: your house, your investments, your grandmother's inheritance when it eventually comes to you. And it specifically states that any inheritance received during the marriage remains solely yours." Judith had studied the document carefully. "Do you think he'll sign it? If he loves you for you, and not for your assets, he shouldn't hesitate," Eleanor had replied, her voice carrying the wisdom of decades of family law practice. When Judith had presented the agreement to Bradley that evening over dinner at her home, his smile had faltered momentarily. "A prenup? Seriously?" His voice had carried a hint of wounded pride. "I thought we trusted each other." "This isn't about trust, Brad," she had explained, reaching for his hand across the table. "It's about being practical. My business is my life's work, and my grandmother's inheritance represents her legacy. I need to protect those things." Bradley had withdrawn his hand, his expression darkening. "So you think I'm after your money? Is that it?" "Of course not," Judith had assured him, though a tiny voice in the back of her mind had whispered caution. "But no one knows what the future holds. This protects both of us." After 2 days of tense silence, Bradley had finally relented, signing the document with a flourish while the notary public, Eleanor's most trusted paralegal, had witnessed and stamped it official. The wedding had proceeded as planned, a lavish affair at one of Nashville's historic mansions, with 300 guests and a band that played until dawn. What Judith couldn't have known then was how quickly Bradley would abandon his own career once they were married, claiming he wanted to explore new opportunities while living comfortably on her income. All rise, the Honorable Judge Thomas Richardson presiding. The courtroom stood as Judge Richardson entered, a tall man with silver hair and a reputation for no-nonsense efficiency. As he took his seat and instructed everyone to be seated, his piercing gaze swept across the room, lingering momentarily on both Judith and Bradley. Crawford versus Crawford. Petition for divorce and division of assets, the clerk announced, handing the judge a thick file. Bradley's attorney stood first. Your Honor, Mark Daniels representing the petitioner, Bradley Crawford. Eleanor Winters for the respondent, Judith Crawford, Your Honor. Judge Richardson nodded. Mr. Daniels, you may proceed with your opening statement. Daniels stepped forward, adjusting his tie. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. My client, Mr. Crawford, has been married to the respondent for 5 years. During this time, they've accumulated significant assets, including investment portfolios, real estate, and an inheritance of $2,800,000 received by Mrs. Crawford during the marriage. Tennessee is an equitable distribution state, and as such, all marital assets should be divided fairly between the parties. Judith watched as Bradley nodded along, his expression smug. She knew exactly what he was thinking, that her grandmother's inheritance, received 2 years into their marriage after Margaret had passed away, would be considered marital property under Tennessee law. Furthermore, Daniels continued, my client sacrificed his own promising career to support his wife's business endeavors. He gave up a 6-figure income in pharmaceutical sales to help manage their joint lifestyle. Mrs. Crawford's success during their marriage was, in part, due to my client's support and contributions to their household. Judith bit the inside of her cheek to keep from reacting. Bradley had never once helped with her business. In fact, he had actively distracted her with constant demands for attention and financial support of his increasingly extravagant lifestyle. When Daniels finished, Judge Richardson turned to Eleanor. Ms. Winters, your opening statement. Eleanor rose slowly, her movements deliberate. Your Honor, while Mr. Daniels presents what seems like a straightforward case under Tennessee law, there's a critical element he has failed to mention. She paused, extracting a document from her folder. Prior to their marriage, the parties executed a valid prenuptial agreement that specifically addresses the very issues before this court today. Bradley's expression shifted, confusion replacing confidence. He leaned over to whisper urgently to his attorney, who appeared equally taken aback. Your Honor, this is the first I'm hearing of any prenuptial agreement, Daniels stammered, rising to his feet. That's because your client chose not to disclose it to you, Eleanor replied smoothly, approaching the bench with the document. I have here the original prenuptial agreement, signed by both parties and properly notarized 5 years ago, 3 weeks before their wedding. Judge Richardson accepted the document, examining it carefully while the courtroom remained silent. Judith watched Bradley's face, witnessing the exact moment when realization dawned, when he remembered the paper he had signed and then evidently forgotten about, or assumed lost. Mr. Crawford. Judge Richardson's voice cut through the tense silence of the courtroom. Do you recognize this document and this signature? Bradley stood unsteadily, his confidence visibly crumbling. I may have signed something before the wedding, Your Honor, but I don't recall the details. The signature page includes your full name, witnessed and notarized, the judge observed. Ms. Winters, please summarize the key provisions of this agreement for the court. Eleanor approached the podium. Your Honor, the agreement explicitly states that all assets owned by each party prior to the marriage remain separate property. Additionally, and most relevantly to these proceedings, it specifies that any inheritance received by either party during the marriage, regardless of when it is received, remains the sole property of the inheriting spouse. Judge Richardson nodded, reviewing the document further. The agreement appears properly executed. Mr. Daniels, do you wish to challenge the validity of this prenuptial agreement? Bradley's attorney looked flustered. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with my client. 15 minutes, Judge Richardson declared, banging his gavel once. In the hallway outside, Judith stood with Eleanor, watching Bradley and his attorney engaged in heated discussion at the far end of the corridor. He never thought I'd keep a copy, did he? Judith asked quietly. Eleanor shook her head. Men like Bradley assume everyone is as careless as they are. He probably convinced himself you'd lost it, or that it wouldn't hold up. I remember how hesitant he was to sign it, Judith reflected. Looking back, that should have been my first warning. Don't blame yourself, Eleanor said firmly. You did the right thing protecting yourself. And now we need to address another matter, his debts. Judith nodded grimly. Over the past year, she had discovered Bradley had accumulated $87,000 in personal debts. Credit cards maxed out on luxury purchases, loans for his sports car, and the money he had invested in his college friend's restaurant that had closed within 6 months. When court resumed, Bradley's demeanor had completely changed. The smugness was gone, replaced by a nervousness that manifested in constant fidgeting and inability to meet Judith's eyes. Mr. Daniels, have you had sufficient time to review the prenuptial agreement with your client? Judge Richardson asked. Yes, Your Honor, Daniels replied. While we acknowledge the existence of the agreement, we believe certain aspects may be unenforceable, particularly regarding inheritances received during the marriage, which Tennessee law typically considers marital property. Eleanor rose immediately. Your Honor, the prenuptial agreement specifically addresses this point. The language is clear and unambiguous. Both parties agreed that inheritances would remain separate property regardless of when they were received. State courts have consistently upheld such provisions when clearly stated in prenuptial agreements. Judge Richardson studied the document again, then looked directly at Bradley. Mr. Crawford, the court finds this prenuptial agreement to be valid and enforceable. According to its terms, Mrs. Crawford's inheritance of $2,800,000 remains her separate property. As the implications of the judge's words sank in, Bradley's face flushed with anger. He turned to glare at Judith, who met his gaze steadily for the first time that day. Furthermore, Judge Richardson continued, the court must address the matter of debts accumulated during the marriage. Eleanor stood. Your Honor, in accordance with the prenuptial agreement, debts incurred individually by either party remain the responsibility of that party. We have documentation showing that Mr. Crawford unilaterally accumulated $87,000 in personal debts during the marriage. She approached the bench with a folder containing credit card statements, loan documents, and bank records, all bearing only Bradley's signature. These debts were incurred without Mrs. Crawford's knowledge or consent, Eleanor explained. The purchases include a $62,000 sports car titled solely in Mr. Crawford's name, and a $25,000 investment in a failed restaurant venture that Mrs. Crawford advised against. Judge Richardson reviewed the documents carefully. Mr. Crawford, how do you respond to these financial records? Bradley stood, his composure completely abandoned. Your Honor, these were investments for our future. The car was for business networking, and the restaurant would have provided income for both of us if it had succeeded. Yet the loan documents bear only your signature, the judge observed, and the vehicle is titled solely in your name. I was acting for both of us, Bradley insisted, his voice rising. Everything I did was for our marriage. Judge Richardson's expression hardened. Mr. Crawford, please control yourself in my courtroom. Turning to the documentation before him, the judge continued. The court finds that these debts were incurred individually by Mr. Crawford and, per the terms of the prenuptial agreement, remain his sole responsibility. The color drained from Bradley's face as the full impact of the ruling became clear. Not only would he receive none of Judith's substantial assets, but he would be solely responsible for nearly $90,000 in debt. Your Honor, Daniels began, scrambling to salvage something for his client, Mr. Crawford left a lucrative career in pharmaceutical sales to support his wife's business. Surely the court will consider spousal support given the sacrifices he made during the marriage. Eleanor was ready. Your Honor, we have documentation showing that Mr. Crawford voluntarily resigned from his position against Mrs. Crawford's advice. Furthermore, bank records indicate that rather than contributing to household expenses, Mr. Crawford's spending increased dramatically after leaving his employment, with all expenses covered by Mrs. Crawford's income. She produced employment records and resignation letters, along with 5 years of detailed financial statements. Additionally, Eleanor continued, Mr. Crawford has a degree in business from Vanderbilt University and 10 years of sales experience. He is fully capable of securing employment to support himself. Judge Richardson nodded, reviewing the final documents. The court denies the request for spousal support. Mr. Crawford is fully capable of self-support through appropriate employment. 3 months after the final divorce decree, Judith stood at the podium in the conference room of Nashville's most prestigious hotel. Before her sat 30 women, all of whom had reached out after hearing about her case through news reports or word of mouth. The Crawford Foundation welcomes you, she began, her voice steady and purposeful. Each of you has contacted us because you find yourself in a situation similar to what I experienced. Married to someone who sees you as a financial resource rather than a partner. The women nodded, some wiping away tears, others taking determined notes. Today, we have assembled a team of the finest family law attorneys, financial advisors, and counselors in Tennessee. They are here to help you understand your options and protect what you've worked so hard to build. Eleanor Winters sat at a table to Judith's right, alongside 3 other attorneys who had agreed to provide pro bono services to the Foundation's clients. On Judith's left sat financial experts and therapists specializing in recovery from financially abusive relationships. My grandmother used to tell me that foresight is the greatest gift we can give ourselves, Judith continued. When I asked her why she had structured her estate to pass directly to me rather than through traditional channels, she said, "Because I want you to have options, no matter what life brings you." She paused, remembering Margaret's wisdom and strength. That's what I want to give each of you today. Options, knowledge, power over your own future. As the event proceeded, Judith circulated among the women, listening to their stories, some heartbreakingly similar to her own, others with different details but the same underlying pattern of financial exploitation. Later that evening, as she locked up the Foundation's new office space, funded entirely from a portion of her grandmother's inheritance, Judith reflected on how differently things might have turned out without that crucial prenuptial agreement. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Eleanor. Heard from a colleague in Memphis. Bradley moved in with his parents last week. Applied for 3 jobs, but no takers yet. You doing okay? Judith smiled, typing back, better than okay. The Foundation helped 5 women today. I think Grandma would be proud. She slipped her phone into her pocket and looked around the office, with its warm lighting and comfortable furnishings designed to make vulnerable women feel safe and valued. On the wall hung a single framed document, a copy of the prenuptial agreement that had protected her future, now serving as both a reminder and a symbol of hope for others. As Judith switched off the lights and prepared to leave, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything she had experienced in years. Bradley had taken 5 years of her life, but in losing him, she had found a mission that would help countless women reclaim their own futures. If you enjoyed this story of resilience and justice, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Each week, we bring you compelling tales of triumph over adversity, and with your support, we can continue sharing these powerful stories with our growing community.